Hi friends, welcome back to my canning room. Today I wanted to share an updated pantry tour for spring 2023 with you. I shared a video like this here on my channel just a few months back, but in that time a lot has changed down here. Of course we have consumed quite a bit, but we have also added quite a bit back onto the pantry shelves, many of which I have shared videos for here on my channel. So one of the main reasons I wanted to do this is so I can kind of take stock and make a bit of a game plan on what I want to focus on as we approach preserving season. We're still a ways away from that. We're just getting into gardening season, but as you can imagine, things get a little bit hectic, and I'd rather make that game plan now so I have a good idea of what I need to focus on as things start coming in from the garden. So we're gonna start out with the shelving behind me, which is mostly our pressure can goods as well as some empty jar storage. And up on the top shelf, we have our meal in a jar recipes. So I do have a couple videos here on my channel sharing most of these meal in a jar recipes, and they have been such a game changer to have on the pantry shelf. The first time that I went to make them, I was a little bit hesitant. We are definitely foodies. I had low expectations for them, but they have been wonderful. They are delicious, and they're just so convenient to have on hand for busy days. I have enjoyed having them even more than something like a freezer meal because I don't have to think about thawing it. So if something comes up, there are meals ready to go on the pantry shelf, and that has just been so wonderful. So we have some ham and bean soup over here in the corner. We've got beef stroganoff, pot roast in a jar, chicken and gravy, chicken chili verde, chipotle beef, and then chicken marsala. So if I had to choose favorites between any of those, it would probably be the beef stroganoff, the pot roast in a jar, the chicken and gravy, and the chipotle beef. So for the beef stroganoff, we will just serve that over some noodles. We are gluten-free, and the best gluten-free noodles that I have found are the Jovial tagliatelle, so that's our preference. And then for the pot roast in a jar and the chicken and gravy, we like to thicken that a little bit when we heat it up. So we'll add some arrowroot starch, just about a couple tablespoons, but you could also do cornstarch or flour. And then for the chipotle beef, we like to make that into a rice bowl. It's really good paired with the peach salsa that you'll see here on our shelf in just a moment, as well as some fermented radishes is one of my favorites. And we'll add some other veggies in there as well. Onto the next shelf, we have our canned carrots over here. We are down to 7 pints. This is something that I will be doing quite a bit more of come fall. One of the big focuses for me this year is going to be pressure canning more vegetables. So I want to do lots of carrots, lots of green beans, beets, and lots more potatoes. And I want to specifically do the potatoes closer to the beginning of the season, and I'll show you why. So this is the last of our potatoes from 2022. And this is the first time I've had this happen before. So you can see that the liquid in the jars looks quite starchy. And I think that is because those potatoes I was trying to make last a little bit longer. They had just started to sprout. So they weren't soft at all, but I think that since they had started to sprout, they maybe just broke down a little bit more during the pressure canning process. And they are totally fine texture-wise. They're not overly soft or anything like that, but they just don't look as pretty on the pantry shelf. And then beside those potatoes, we have our carrot soup. This is a recipe that I shared here on my channel, so I'll be sure to link that video down in the description box below. The only thing that I did adjust with that is I added some Thai red curry paste just to fit my taste preferences, and you'll notice that it is a blended soup, which is typically not recommended. It is written into the ball recipe that way though. I think since it is quite a thin soup, that's why there's not too much concern with density there. Okay, we're down to the bottom shelf. Back in the corner, we've got one last winter squash. It is still holding strong. It is not softening. It has not wrinkled at all, which is pretty amazing because we're almost at June at this point. And to the side of that, we've got a bunch of our honey. So I do have quite a bit jarred up, about 25 pounds. I find it easiest to do that just kind of all in one go since it is kind of a messy process. And then we have another 25 pounds just down below. So last year we got 125 pounds of honey from our bees. I'm hoping we get at least that much this year. We did lose one hive over winter, but it was weak all last year as well. We actually didn't pull any honey from it. So we'll see how this year goes. And then beside that, I've got one lonely jar of beef bone broth. I have a ton of bones in the freezer that I need to make into broth. We are going to be butchering our chickens in about 2 weeks at this point, and so I need to clear out some of that stuff to make sure we've got plenty of freezer space. So we are going to be stocking up on a ton more chicken and beef bone broth here in just a few days. That's kind of one of those continual things I'm always adding to the pantry shelf with bone broth. And then I've just got a single jar of navy beans over here. We've got a bunch of chickpeas. Again, those are kind of continuous things that I'm always doing. So I would like to get a bunch more kidney beans here onto the pantry shelf shortly. So that is something I've got to get done. And then to the side, we have all of our instant hummus in a jar. So this is something that I did share here on my channel. It is not blended. It is just the chickpeas canned with some seasonings, sesame seeds, lemon juice. And what I do is I drain off the liquid, but I reserve it. I'll add it to the blender, slowly add back that liquid until it's the consistency you like, with a couple tablespoons of olive oil. But that's really nice to have on hand for easy snacks or appetizers. Moving over to our next section of shelving, these are all water bath canned items, and up top we've got all of our salsa. So last year I did 60 pints of this roasted tomato salsa. It's our very favorite. We are down to 25, so we go through quite a bit of salsa. So I anticipate doing another 50 to 60 pints of that come September, and that's going to be something that we do just as the tomatoes are coming in. And one of the things that I love about home canned items, specifically like the tomato products, is you get a variety of color depending on the kind of tomatoes that you're using. So I don't have any here, but we had some batches that were a lot more orange from all the yellow and orange tomatoes that we grew. And then we have our peach salsa over here. This is delicious. It is a ball recipe, and it is something that we will never be without. It is really good paired with the chipotle beef. We like it just with chips as well. Super delicious. It's also great on any fish. So that is a staple for sure. I think I did 18 jars last year, and you'll see we've kind of got a variety of sizes. I like to do that. So if I don't need a full pint, I can just grab a smaller jar, and I don't need to worry about anything getting lost in the fridge or anything like that. And then we have our roasted green tomato salsa verde. So that is going to be a recipe that we do every year, not because it's our favorite salsa and we reach for it all the time, but because it's a great way to use up leftover green tomatoes. That batch we did last year was actually a mix of green tomatoes and tomatillos. So we'll use that in things like enchiladas and white chicken chili, and it is included in that chicken chili verde recipe that we have in the meal in a jar section. Now on this next shelf, we've got our pasta sauce. We are down to 8 quarts. We did 15, but we did our pasta sauce quite late. It wasn't until mid-February that I actually canned it. We just had all of our tomatoes in the freezer. So I would ideally like to do at least 30 quarts. I would say more than that, but this year I really want to focus on doing a lot of crushed tomatoes, so I have just versatility. Crushed tomatoes are something that I am buying from the store still quite often, and last year I did not do any. So that is something that I'm going to be focusing on, doing lots of crushed tomatoes. And then I do have a video on that pasta sauce as well, so I'll link that in the description box down below. Next we have our bruschetta in a jar, and this is something that I have loved having on the pantry shelf. It is delicious, but it's not a staple. So we will likely do another batch of it. I think it's really pretty, especially once you get to using all different colors of tomatoes, but it's not something that we absolutely need. So I do like to have this for quick appetizers. I did see on, I think my last pantry tour video, someone mentioned that they like to use it as the base for pizza. So that sounds really good. It's great on top of chicken breasts, but just a really fun thing to have on the pantry shelf. And then we have our pizza sauce. We have 11 half pints left. We always do it in half pints. It is just my husband and I, so that's kind of the perfect size for a pizza night. I would like to have about 25, so that's something I'm definitely going to be sharing here on my channel once we've got tomatoes coming in. I feel like this last batch of pizza sauce I did, I just really dialed in the recipe and it turned out so good. So definitely plan to share that. Okay, beside that, we've got our tomato jam. This is something that I don't think I'll ever be without. I think of the tomato jam as like a ketchup replacement. My husband does like it, but he does not feel the same in that sense. So I would like to make our own ketchup this year. So if you've got a good recipe, leave me a comment down below. But as for the tomato jam, I do want to make a couple adjustments this year. I think I will add just a little bit more apple cider vinegar so it's got a bit more acidity. And then I'd also like to add quite a bit more chili flakes. Then we have our Rhubarb BBQ Sauce over here, and this is something I shared a video for here on my channel last week, and it was something that I was a little bit skeptical about at first when I tried it last year, because the flavor profile is a little bit different, but we ended up loving it. So it's got cinnamon, ginger, allspice, so different than your traditional barbecue sauce, but we have loved having it on hand. I don't plan to do any more this year because I do want to make a apple bourbon barbecue sauce, so I'd rather have just some variety on the shelf. Then tucked into the corner over here, we've got our chai tea concentrate, and this is something that I would make again, but I would make a lot of adjustments to. I think that the tea flavor needs to be stronger. I don't know if I didn't steep it long enough or it just needs more black tea in the recipe. We would also add a lot more spices, and I would reduce the sweetness. So what I find with this is to get the flavor, you know, the spice flavor of the concentrate, I need more, but then it becomes too sweet. Okay, on this bottom shelf, we've got all of our pickles. Back over here, we've got some sweet and spicy pickled radishes, and I don't plan to do those again. They're just not something that I'm finding us gravitate towards, so they don't need a space on the pantry shelf. If I'm going to preserve radishes, I'm going to do so by fermenting them. I've got a great recipe for garlic dill fermented radishes. I still have a couple jars of those left, and we love those on things like fish tacos, or with the chipotle beef in a rice bowl is great as well. So if I do any radishes, that's going to be the way that I do it. And then over here, we've got one last half pint jar of banana peppers. I do also ferment banana peppers, so I have a couple jars of those in the fridge as well, but I like to have a variety. And then something I really like to do this year are lots of pickled jalapenos as well as cowboy candy. I'm growing a good variety of jalapenos this year, your traditional green ones, and then we're also doing orange spice, pumpkin spice, and a lemon spice. So I think the just variety of all those colors in a jar is going to look really pretty on the pantry shelf. So definitely we'll be canning a lot of jalapenos this year. And then we've got just a few 1/4 pint jars of mixed peppers. Those are just sliced into rings, and they are a mix of sweet peppers and hot peppers. And I like to have that mix. They're great, honestly, by themselves, in salads, on nachos, all sorts of things. So we like to have that mix. Then we have our dill pickle relish, and that is something that I am going to do year after year, and I don't think that I'll ever kind of have a goal as to how many pints I want to do. I just like to do it with some of the pickling cucumbers that have gone a little bit too far, and that's a great way to use them up if they're a little bit too big to make into pickles and have them, you know, not get soft. So I really like having that on hand. It's easy to just take a scoop to add to chicken salad, egg salad, tuna salad, anything like that, and a great way to use up any of those cucumbers that might have just gone a little bit too long. And then we have our beloved dill pickles. So I think I did 30 quarts last year, and they were a mix of regular and hot, and I would like to do a little bit more than that. I do feel like we've slightly rationed them. We're down to 12 quart jars at this point. But I also think that having the dill pickle relish has made them last a little bit longer, because I'm not pulling from them and chopping them up for things like egg salad, tuna salad, chicken salad, and whatnot. So I would like to do a little bit more, maybe closer to 40 quarts would be awesome. I feel like that probably sounds crazy to some people, but we are definitely pickle people. I'd also like to do like a sweet and spicy pickle, so we'll see what we end up doing this year. And then the last pickled item that we have down here are our pickled beets. We've got 7 pints left, and I don't anticipate doing any this year. If I do, it'll be a small batch. But as I mentioned earlier, I'd really like to focus on just pressure canning plain vegetables. So I'd like to have a lot of plain pressure canned beets on the pantry shelf. All right, this last portion of the pantry are mostly fruit-based items. Up top here, I have some canned plums. I have mentioned this before, but they are not my favorite by any means, and I'm trying not to let them go to waste. I'm using them as a marinade. That's kind of the main thing that I've been doing with them. Just blending them up with some fresh ginger, garlic, lime juice, chili flakes, and marinating chicken with that, which is pretty good, but just not my favorite. So we definitely will not be doing those again. Beside those plums, we've got our peaches. Home canned peaches are one of our favorite things on the pantry shelf, and I don't think that I could ever do enough. I just did 16 quarts last year, and I knew that we would have to ration them, and we did just from the get-go. So we've got 4 quarts left, and I would love to do about 30, but peaches are not something that we have growing here on the property. So it is something that we need to purchase, which is not a huge deal, but they're also just not my favorite thing to can. It's worth the work. We love to have them on the shelf, but the actual process is not my favorite. Then we've got our juice concentrates up here. So this is a blackberry lemonade concentrate. We did make that together, so I have a video here on my channel. I'll leave that in the description box down below. Beside that, we've got a mixed berry concentrate and a strawberry mango concentrate. Now, these two I kind of just based off of the blackberry lemonade concentrate, and my whole reason for doing those was because we had a freezer start to thaw and all of that fruit just clumped together. So I used it to make the juice concentrates. I don't drink a whole lot of juice. My husband does really like to have it on hand, but it is perfect as is for a second ferment with kombucha. On this next shelf, we've got some applesauce. This is just plain applesauce, no cinnamon, no sweetener, and that is how we like to can it. I do not do applesauce 2 years in a row. We just don't go through it that quickly, so we will be good this year. As I mentioned before, there is an apple bourbon barbecue sauce that I'd like to make, and that recipe calls for some applesauce, so we'll have a couple quarts that will go to that, but I do like to have it on hand. It's just not something that we are rotating through super quickly. So this year my efforts with the apples are going to be focused on dehydrating more and freezing more slices. We also have 7 half pints of apple butter left, and I don't anticipate that I'll make any more in the fall. That should carry us through for quite a while. We have only a few uses that we really like for that, but with us raising our own pork this year, I think that is going to be awesome to have on hand, and I'm really looking forward to try that as a glaze on the pork. And all of this over here are our jams and preserves. These are one of the big things that I'm really trying to work through right now. So I'll use the preserves to sweeten Greek yogurt. I'll use them in like oatmeal bars, or I'm also using them as glazes on meats or in marinades. So we'll use some of the preserves with some vinegar, a little bit of olive oil, let that marinate, and that works out really well, but we have more preserves than we need. And while I probably don't need to do any new ones this year, I know I will. I do have a couple recipes that I want to share here on my channel, so that's the main motivation for that. So for preserves, we've got some plum cardamom preserves, and this is one that I really like to have in a marinade. We have some jalapeno plum jam. This is great on a charcuterie board. That's my main use for it. And there were quite a few requests in the last video to share this recipe, so I definitely will come fall. We've got vanilla plum jam, some peach preserves, one last jar of blackberry jam, and let's see, one last jar of rhubarb jam. Now on this last shelf, we've got some blackberry pie filling. I don't anticipate doing any pie filling this year. That is plenty to get us through. And again, I do have a video on that one, so I'll be sure to link that below. And the rest is just dehydrated goods. So we've got 7 quarts of dehydrated plums left. That is a big way that we preserve the fruit that we grow here. We've got one last jar of pears, one last jar of apples. So again, I want to do a ton more apples this year. We've got some of our elderberries and then a bunch of herbs here. So we've got oregano, we've got some raspberry leaf, some sage, and some peppermint. And then we have a jar of dried calendula. Alright, that is it for our spring 2023 pantry tour. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that subscribe button down below. I've got lots more canning content here on my channel with a lot more to come. I would love to hear some of your favorite items to can in the comments down below, so feel free to share those, and thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next video.